What's up, everybody? It is I, Seven Chapo, friends call me Chop, and we are back with another episode of Chop Logic. Yes, we are back with another episode. First things first, thank you so much for joining us. This has just been a great experience, a great time. Just being able to do this show, this has been a passion project of mine for some time, long before we were even able to bring it back. So the fact that we've been going this strong and the amount of support that we've gotten from it so far has been amazing. So I just want to thank all the supporters, all the audience members, anyone who's even watched 5 seconds of these videos. Just thank you very much. So, just wanted to get into that, let's get right into it. So today we are going to talk about how to direct non-professional talent, right? Now, when I say non-professional, I want to say not actors. That's more of an accurate way of saying it, right? So not necessarily saying like, they're not professional, like they don't show up on time or nothing like that, but people who aren't comfortable being on camera, as our jobs as videographers are to essentially coach them through those things, help them as much as possible. These are just some things that could help out in that process, right? So first things first, when it comes to directing on-screen talent, one of the biggest things is communication, all right? You want to make sure that you're explaining as much as possible to the person who's going to be on camera so that they know exactly what they're doing, what they're saying, how they're moving, how they're acting, okay? If you have certain interview questions that you may have for that person, like let's say it was more talking head type content, something similar to this, then definitely send them the questions ahead of time. Definitely give them the opportunity to sit with it, formulate their answers, prepare how they're going to speak on camera, things of that nature, right? Those are many things that you can kind of just get into in terms of just the communication aspect, even just in the process of just before you get to the point of shooting, like during pre-production, just making sure like, hey, this is what you're going to say. This is where you're going to say it. This is how you should say it. This is the type of tone. This is the messaging. This is the mood that you should be in. Like if you want to say something more aggressive or if you want to say something more lighthearted, like things of that nature, right? It's your job as the videographer or as the producer of the project to direct the talent, essentially. In a bigger project where you have a full-blown director for it, it'll be their job specifically, but you have to direct the talent as much as possible to make sure that you're getting the right vision for the project, right? So you want to make sure that you're sharing any and all topics, questions, things of that nature ahead of time. You also want to make sure that you're explaining the process as much as possible. Again, this is all just clear-cut communication, all right? So making sure that, any questions or concerns are addressed and fully explained, super helpful with clear-cut communication beforehand, right? So you don't want anybody worrying about what they're going to say. You don't want anybody worrying about how they can mess up, things of that nature. You want to make sure that everything is clear and as concise as possible to make sure that we're getting the best looks possible. All right. Also, just having clear expectations, right? So ideally in a world where I am hosting or in a world where I am essentially directing inexperienced people on how to act on camera, I would essentially just tell them to be as natural as possible, depending on what the project is. Usually I'm not doing anything that's overly scripted or anything that's like essentially actor focused with anyone who doesn't have that experience already. So just setting clear-cut expectations like, listen, this is all you have to say. This is how you have to say it. And more than likely, I expect you to mess up. It's perfectly fine to mess up. Even me, I mess up on these shows every day. All right. And guess what? I still come in and we still shoot it. We still rock out and we still do the best job possible. All right. So it's just kind of like one of those things where you shouldn't have any worries about that person messing up. You should already expect it. And you should set that same expectation with that person as well. Tell them to expect to mess up. Get the mess ups out early. You know what I mean? Being able to mess up will allow them to get more comfortable with what they're going to say and allow them to even better remember how they should say it. So that's a lot easier for them to get it right the next time. All right. So those are things. And then of course, you also want to emphasize rehearsal. Rehearsal is also key. So in terms of directing on-air talent that may not have experience with being in front of a camera, you always want to make sure that they are rehearsing, all right? So even if they're rehearsing at home, they can rehearse it in front of you. They can rehearse it the day of the shoot, right before you start recording. You always want to make sure that they're rehearsing. You also want to make sure that they have any notes that they may need or any talking points that they have that they need to address, and you make sure that they have that ready as well. So it's your job as a director / producer of the project to guarantee that these things are happening. You know, even if it's just like a check-in, like, hey, like the day before, hey, make sure you rehearse X, Y, and Z. Make sure you are prepared to answer these questions. You know what I mean? Like, some people don't like that. Some people think that, you know, they can get the most organic response just by you asking the questions in real time during the shoot. And, you know, some people operate like that. Some people don't. Ideally, I would want to make sure that you have the questions ahead of time as much as possible, you know, just to make sure that there are any misconceptions or if there's any issues or any problems that they're addressed head on before we actually see each other physically for the actual production day. So again, rehearsal is super key. And then of course, you know, like I said, with rehearsal, meeting beforehand, even if you have to meet with this person via Zoom, in person, whatever the case may be, meeting with these people so that they have, again, an outlet to express any issues or concerns before you get to the point of actually doing the production will be also very important in making sure that everything runs smoothly. All right. So just keeping everything casual as much as possible. Again, setting expectations, but not putting too much stress on the talent. Again, the talent has never done this before. So while you may have been behind the camera for this many times for many different people, not everybody has been in front of the camera experiencing these same things. So giving a level of grace and also just keeping everything lighthearted and casual as much as possible in a relaxed manner, not putting too much stress on people is one of the biggest things to get the best performances out of people. Now, depending on who you are, you can maybe think differently on that. That's always been my approach. Like, for example, Stanley Kubrick, when he shot The Shining, if you know anything about the behind the scenes for that movie, you know it was a nightmare for those actors because a lot of them were being told to do the same things multiple times. I think the woman, her name is missing me right now, but she played the mother in that movie. She had to literally cry and scream for hours upon hours on end. And that was torture for her, you know? So it's things like that, you know, could have gotten a great performance. I think that The Shining is a really good movie. But at the end of the day, that's just not how I operate. And if you feel like you need to operate like that, that's perfectly fine. But just knowing that pushing talent in the wrong direction can make them break and not want to do it. All right. So I don't want to push anybody in any direction, especially if they don't have experience already, to the point of them deciding that they don't want to do the project anymore. All right. It's a fine line between getting the best performance or the best version of people's self during camera or on camera when it's time to record. And then there's a fine line between doing that and getting the worst out of someone because you decided to yell at them or you decided to pressure them or you decided to do everything you can to get the best performance, and then it amounts to absolutely nothing. So you kind of want to just keep it as casual and as lighthearted in tone as much as possible. Keep it friendly, keep it organic as much as possible as well. And you want to make sure that you're staying focused on getting the project done and keeping everybody as relaxed and joyful as possible, because that's the greatest way to make sure that that person is going to want to work with you again. Because 9 times out of 10, if you're working with someone who doesn't have experience in front of a camera, it's probably someone who's paying you, at least in my experiences, right? So 9 times out of 10, it's usually a client that I'm working with, that I'm shooting for them and their content that they had to be in front of the camera for, that don't have the experience. So if I'm putting too much pressure on them or I'm putting too much stress on them to get it right, then they're not going to want to do the experience not only with me ever again, but with anybody ever again. And that's something that I want to avoid as much as possible. So the best clients are repeat clients, and repeat clients are happy clients. And the best way to keep happy clients is to keep everything as lax as possible, keep everything professional as possible, but also making sure that we're not creating more pressure than there has to be for anyone. So, you know what I'm saying, this is some of the other things, you know, but there's a few more things we can also get into, like, you know, just minimizing distractions during the production day. So making sure you're not fiddling with anything, making sure there's nobody on crew or on set that's doing anything that could be considered distracting, that can get the best performance out of someone, especially if they don't have experience speaking on camera. Also just keeping the environment as controlled as possible. So making sure that, there's not any outside elements. Like let's say someone knocking at the door for DoorDash or something, or if the weather is crazy, and it's thunder and lightning outside and it becomes too much of a distraction maybe. Or even just like if the water's running in the back, something like that, or somebody chewing on some chips. You just want to make sure that you're minimizing all that as much as possible. And then just anything in terms of like technicals, like, hey, make sure that you're framing people up accordingly. Like, hey, you have to sit right here. You have to sit like this. Make sure your head is turned in this specific direction. Make sure you're speaking this way into the camera or speaking this way into the mic, things of that nature, right? You want to make sure all those things are kind of addressed again in as much of a casual manner as possible. And you want to make sure that you're giving very clear and concise directions to people. So you want to make sure that you're not overly complicating the process. You want to make sure that you're keeping everything simplified as much as possible in terms of what you're telling the talent to do on camera or how to be on camera. It's the same way you're telling them what to say on camera, right? And then sometimes even if you don't necessarily have a script that the talent may be able to use, even like a prompt. So even just like telling them like, hey, in this manner, talk about this. Like, hey, in a more friendly tone, talk about videography, but then in more of an excited tone, talk about video editing. That's just one example, right? But just anything to maintain engagement. You always want to make sure that the person is maintaining eye contact. You want to make sure that they're maintaining the same tone of voice as much as possible. And you also want to make sure that you're allowing enough time and space for multiple takes. All right. And then, you want to be fluid as possible. So you want to make sure that you're adapting to people's styles and people's, way of operating, because you don't necessarily want to be too rigid in the process. And then again, the client or the person, the on-camera talent becomes too uncomfortable with the situation because of the rigidness of it, right? So just be fluid to how they move, how they operate, learn to adapt and be fluid as well. And, just keep everything as smooth as possible, just doing things like that. So, even just being able to come back in post-production and fix things if need be. Just also, I highly encourage, of course, making sure that you get the best takes as possible, but just making sure that you're not necessarily, some things can be fixed in post, but you want to make sure we keep everything true to camera as possible when you're recording them. And like I said, you want to get the most out of on-camera talent, especially if they don't have experience being on camera before. Like I said, you want to have the best environment possible in any shooting setting. So just setting the right expectations, having as much communication as possible, and having as much preparation as possible, not only for you, but for the on-air talent, especially with their lack of experience. It's going to make sure that everything runs as smoothly as possible and you get through it as quickly as possible too. So that's pretty much it. We're going to go to break, and when we come back, we're going to hit you with some trivia. Let's go. This video is sponsored by Chop House Media Group. Now listen, podcasting is hard, all right? There's a lot of moving parts to a successful podcast, whether it be the shooting side, the post-production side, the audio mixing and mastering. Just having the right strategy and know how to even get this podcast in the right places and getting it into the right positions to get monetized. And that is where Chop House Media Group helps out at. We have coined the phrase, the podcast in the box, where we pretty much facilitate anything and everything that you need to run a successful podcast, between the production, the post-production, the strategy and tips and tricks that you need to be 1,000% successful in every single aspect of your podcasting career. Now, if you are interested in being a part of this and making sure that you get your podcast to the next level, whether you are just now starting out your podcast or you are already in the podcasting field but want to take it to another level, be sure to hit the link below and schedule your free consultation with us to make sure that we get your podcast up and going further than you can ever imagine. All right, again, thank you to Chop House Media Group for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the show. Welcome back. All right, so as you know, the laptop closes and it's time for that trivia. You feel what I'm saying? So look, if you don't know, this is how it go. I have my producer Javane usually asking the questions. It usually is 2 out of 3 that I get incorrect based on the topics that we had each episode. And then from there, if I get 2 out of 3 incorrect, I will give a cash prize to the audience. Now, first things first, Javane is not here, but we do have my brother Jason right behind the camera. Jason, say what's up for me one time.
What's going on?
My good brother, my good brother. Coming in, stepping in. And if I were to get the questions incorrect, we will give a cash prize to the audience. The only way you can be eligible for it is if you subscribe to the YouTube channel and then like this video and then comment below your favorite moment. And then we'll pick one person from the comment section to win the cash prize of that episode if I get the questions wrong. I ain't trying to get nothing wrong though. So we can go ahead and get started.
All right. So for the first question, we have, which directing approach is most helpful for coaching real people through on-camera dialogue? Is it A, give feedback only after the full take? B, use detailed line-by-line notes with acting terms? C, rephrase the message and let them say it in their own words? Or D, avoid rehearsing to keep it raw?
And what was the question again?
Which directing approach is most helpful for coaching real people through on-camera dialogue?
And what was C again?
C was rephrase the message and let them say it in their own words.
I want to say it was C.
C is for correct. All right.
Cool. Yeah, definitely letting people phrase however they need it to make it feel comfortable. Yeah. So again, a lot of this stuff too, I want to make sure I'm saying it's not for like movie roles or like actual like acting gigs where you have to literally be a different person or in a different scenario. Like when Idris Elba plays any American ever, you feel what I'm saying? Like I can't tell him like, oh, okay, I like how you did, but say how you say it in Britain. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, bro, I'm not finna do an accent. But you get the point, right? Like this is strictly for like if you were working with a client, like let's say doing like professional business content, if you were like working with someone who just doesn't particularly have any experience in being in front of a camera, primarily, and maybe even just people who are just starting out in their acting careers and you have to produce a certain project for them. So yeah, we can go.
What's one benefit of recording a few casual takes before the official slate? A, you can skip the need for coverage. B, the subject may accidentally reveal bloopers. C, you capture more relaxed and genuine delivery. Or D, it lowers memory card usage.
I gotta say C.
C is also correct.
Where we from, we call that pulling a Markel. I feel like only Jason would understand why I said that. But yeah, shout out to Markel. When we were in high school, he would tell us like, oh, okay, just practice. I'm not recording. And then he'd really be recording. And then he'd be like, oh, okay, we already got it. So that was his whole thing. And it'll be annoying in the moment for sure. It's annoying in the moment for sure. But sometimes you gotta do that, and it's worked more times than I like to believe. So shout out to Markel, man.
Heard, most def. Which directing technique is especially helpful when shooting testimonials or unscripted interviews? A, stick strictly to the script. B, use open-ended prompts instead of direct questions. C, tell them to summarize their thoughts in one sentence. Or D, make the subject read off cue cards for control.
Damn. Those last three all sounded good in their own special way. Read the question again.
Okay. Which directing technique is especially helpful when shooting testimonials or unscripted interviews?
Yeah, it wouldn't be D because cue card would be. So what's B and C?
B is use open-ended prompts instead of direct questions. C is tell them to summarize their thoughts in one sentence.
I'm gonna say C.
Tell them to summarize their thoughts in one sentence.
Yeah, but I think it could be B though. But I'm gonna say C. C is my final answer.
C cubed. That is not correct.
What was the answer?
The answer is use open-ended prompts instead of direct questions.
B.
Yep.
Yeah, I knew it.
So I would just, if I can give a little on that one, when you're shooting testimonials and unscripted, you want to expound more than you want to summarize.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, because you can always like cut whatever you need to cut out of it.
Yeah, but if they, shorten it, then you can't really cut for real.
So that's so C is telling them to summarize their thoughts in one sentence.
Got you. Yeah.
Yeah. Where versus like B is like you're using open ended,
so that they can kind of like interpret however they need to
and expound upon
it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm tracking. All right.
Yeah. But then again, there are times where you'd be like, I like what you said, but can you put that in one nice tight sentence?
And that's why I was like, it could be B or C, because I've been on both sides of that, where it's like, okay, I'll give you an open ended, and then you kind of just keep going, and we'll cut around it. And then there's other times where like, all right, that sounded great, but I only need about like 30% of all the things you just said.
Yeah.
So
I get it.
Yeah, that's why I was like, But all right, boy, y'all gonna hate me, man. Listen, I'm gonna keep saying it. I ain't making these questions. You feel me? So definitely talk to my producer Javane. He'll be back. He'll be back soon for sure. So you definitely you holler at him about these questions. Definitely be sure to catch some of the previous episodes. Listen, man, we have given out cash prizes, and there's definitely episodes where we could have given a cash prize, but nobody commented below, So if you catch some of the previous episodes, you'll definitely have an opportunity to win a cash prize, and even like future episodes as well. So necessarily don't think because you didn't win nothing today, you'll never win anything. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes, hey, you might win twice. You never know. Never know. But that has been another episode of Chop Logic. I want to thank y'all so much for joining us. Either way, please be sure to subscribe. Please be sure to like this video. Please be sure to comment your favorite moment. And of course, we'll catch you guys next time. Peace.